So we're going to start off talking about the emerald ash borer. That is, I think, the biggest concern out of all of the insects that we'll be discussing today. And this is a metallic wood-boring beetle. So it's in a family of beetles that are often just basically referred to as metallic wood-boring beetles, or also jewel beetles. So they tend to be shiny in color, many of them, certainly not all of them. They tend to be small to medium-sized insects. And this family of insects lives all over the world. But the emerald ash borer specifically is one of these species of metallic wood-boring beetles that feeds on trees in the genus Fraxinus, which includes all ash trees. And importantly, this insect can kill all North American ash species, regardless of if it's planted just as an ornamental so for something showy, or if it's something native to the area. That's really important to keep in mind. And it's native to Eastern Asia. And we can see some of the range of this insect in northeastern China here, but it's also important to note that insects don't really follow country boundaries, right? So this insect probably also lives in some areas of Mongolia, et cetera, but in general, it is native to sort of the eastern region of Asia. And this is considered the most destructive invasive forest pest, especially in the United States. So just keep that in mind as well. This is an extremely destructive pest to ash trees in North America. In terms of the current distribution of emerald ash borer in the United States, we find it in 35 states and 5 Canadian provinces in North America in total. And then it's killed billions of ash trees, right? So again, this is one of the most destructive invasive pests of ash trees, or of any tree in North America. So all these little red dots here are where the initial detection of emerald ash borer was in individual counties within states. And it goes out until Colorado. We have found emerald ash borer in Colorado, but we haven't found emerald ash borer in any of these states that are colored in gray. So keep that in mind. And you notice here that Utah does not have any detections yet, so we have not found emerald ash borer in Utah yet. But it's always possible for it to spread here. It can spread to anywhere that has ash trees. So that'll take us to our second credit question. So in regards to emerald ash borer biology, again, this is a small green metallic wood-boring beetle, and notably this insect is about a ½ inch in length. So they're quite small. They are, however, very showy and shiny, so sometimes it can help with identification. One of the really easy diagnostic features is actually this purple-colored abdomen here, where the hard outer wings are shiny green in color, and then the underneath the abdomen is a shiny purple. However, unless the emerald ash borer is in flight, or if the wings are open, you can't really see this shiny purple. You can kind of make it out on the side of the body as well. There's a little bit of purple sneaking out here. But it's really hard to see unless you're actually looking at the specimen with a magnifying glass or under a microscope. So in general, for the adults, you're looking for this ½ inch shiny green beetle. The head and the thorax here can be a little bit brownish purple in color. But overall, the beetle, you would just consider it green. So the larva, you can see the larva in the field if you survey for them. So they're often considered tapeworm-like, and they often look like stacked bells. So if you look at each individual segment or section of this larva, you can see that there's little bell shapes that are kind of stacked on top of one another. So that can be a really good diagnostic feature for emerald ash borer as well, but it's important to note that other species of metallic wood-boring beetles can often look similar, either the adult or the larva. So just keep that in mind. The eggs, it's really uncommon to see them in the field unless you know exactly what you're looking for. So they're small, they're typically brownish to reddish brown in color, but they're about 1 millimeter long and they're unlikely to be seen. So we really want to focus our diagnostic feature on the adults and the larva. And more importantly, we're also going to look at some of the other ways that we can diagnose emerald ash borer in the field as well, because you don't always need the adults or the larva present. You can look for other things in the trees. So in Utah, or in this area at least, there's going to be 1 generation per year.
Zach, a question came in. How large do the larvae get when they're mature?
So when the larvae, let me see if I can go back here. There we go. So the larvae are also going to be very small. So they're very slender. They're going to be a little bit longer than the adults. I've actually never seen an emerald ash borer larva, but they probably max out at about 3/4 of an inch, but don't exactly quote me on that. But they're also going to be very small, less than 1 inch long. It's a great question. And I'm trying to monitor the chat too, but it is not popping up for me. So thank you, Mayor, for catching that chat, and feel free to ask any other questions that pop up as well. If they do arrive in Utah, we expect only one generation per year. So adults begin to emerge depending on where you are in the state at different times. It could be as early as May, if you look in the southern parts. So we have all these green colorations where the degree days will allow them to emerge around the mid-May timeframe. If you go up to the northern part of the states, you're looking at not really seeing the adults until mid to late June, perhaps even later than that. So the adults will feed on foliage of the ash trees, and then they will essentially just go to find bark and lay eggs on the bark. The larva will then bore in, and then the larva will begin to feed in the cambium layer. And then the larva will feed throughout the summer and essentially overwinter in that larval stage. So we don't really see, or so you're not, and during the winter, you're seeing larval stages that are still within those trees. And then they'll pupate in the spring and then again emerge as adults in these different timeframes throughout the year. So keep that in mind. We're not going to really see adults until we're already into the summer, most likely, if they do arrive in Utah. So again, we do have adults that will feed on leaves, but it's important to note that you will never really see a lot of damage from the adults themselves. We're not so concerned about the adults other than for the fact that they can lay the eggs and the larva is what's actually going to cause the damage. So the most important diagnostic feature that I can give you today, or ways that we can scout for emerald ash borer in the field, is to actually look for this exit hole from the adult. So we have these larvae that are feeding within the tree, and then they're going to pupate in the spring, and then they're going to need to emerge out of the tree. And characteristically, when emerald ash borer does this, they leave these nearly perfect D-shaped exit holes. Not a lot of other insects do that. So if you're seeing that in ash, that's a really big concern, especially if you're in the state of Utah. So if you see that, people need to know about it, essentially, right? So look for those D-shaped exit holes. If you look at damage to the leaves, that's not necessarily saying that it's anything to do with emerald ash borer. There are many other insects that feed on ash leaves, so we really need to look for these D-shaped exit holes. I can't stress that enough. It's one of the easiest ways to diagnose emerald ash borer in ash trees. So how do these larvae feed? Well, like many boring insects, they're going to leave some sort of gallery underneath in the cambium layer, underneath the bark in the cambium layer. So with metallic wood boring beetles in general, and especially emerald ash borer, the galleries tend to be meandering. So there's not really any sort of perfect pattern to it. So if we're looking at these two examples here, we see that just these meandering galleries that are kind of randomly going throughout the tree or the cambium layer. So this typically is seen near the tips or near the canopy first of the tree, and then they'll slowly move down as the infestation gets worse, or if the infestation is heavier. So you will find these galleries only under the bark, and then once they're again ready to emerge, they'll emerge and leave that D-shaped exit hole. So if you're seeing some of these galleries that have really well-developed patterns to them, it tends to not be in this family of wood boring pests, and we might be worried about something else. So look for this meandering random pattern. That's the best way to say, hey, maybe there's emerald ash borer. If you can combine these galleries with a D-shaped exit hole, odds are you do have emerald ash borer, but it's always good to confirm that still. So again, scouting underneath the bark is one of the best ways, and looking for that D-shaped exit hole is extremely important to diagnosing emerald ash borer. So in Utah, we have two native species of ash trees. There are many others that are just ornamentally planted. However, these two native species, single leaf ash and velvet ash, are most definitely susceptible.
Hey, Zach, real quick,
Yes.
we got a question. Does EAB only attack ash?
Yeah, so emerald ash borer is only going to attack ash trees. There are no issues with any other species of trees that we know of. There have been some documentation. I used to actually work at a lab that worked with emerald ash borer directly. And there is some data that shows that they can actually attack a couple of other trees, but it's not anywhere near to the extent that they can actually just completely demolish ash trees. So that's a very good question. And there is some data out there on that if you just do some Google searches. But the damage and infestations on other trees are basically moot as far as I know. So that's a great question. Thank you, Lori, for asking that. So again, we do have these two ash species that they can infest here that they can definitely kill. And they can also kill any other ornamentally planted ash, no matter what species you see. So you want to start looking for the symptoms, and I'll explain some of these symptoms momentarily. in addition to the ones that we've already talked about, right? So we're looking for some symptoms in the tree canopy. We're going to look at the bark. We're going to look at the canopy, the leaves. We're going to look for different symptoms. And then if we see them, we really want to scout better for emerald ash borer by looking for those D-shaped exit holes, by looking for the larval galleries, and then surveying for adults if we have the capability to do that. So if you see this D-shaped exit hole, or you see these galleries, these random galleries under, in the cambium of the ash trees, it's really important that you contact Utah State University, and I'll have my contact information at the end, or the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food if you see some of these symptoms we're going to discuss. So that way we get it reported properly and we take care of the issue as best as possible. So that definitely. Yeah, so those are two really great questions. So in Asia, or in East Asia, where emerald ash borer is native, there are always more commonly natural enemies that keep insects at bay, or insect populations at bay. So there are several types, or a few main species of parasitoid wasps that will fly around and parasitize essentially the emerald ash borer that are infesting the trees. So that keeps emerald ash borer at bay in East Asia where it is native, right? So there are native parasitoid wasps and other native insects that can either parasitize or eat or kill the emerald ash borer. And when insects invade new regions, it tends to be the case that there's not an insect that does that quite as well. So then if you think of other invasive species in the area, I think if you've heard of the brown marmorated stink bug, it's the same way. So there aren't predators or parasitoid wasps or parasitoids in general that help to keep those populations at bay. So there's a lot of research going on right now to help release those insects to help control emerald ash borer, which could be a whole talk on its own. But essentially, native insects will keep other native insect populations at bay, which we don't really have that here in the United States or in North America because the insect is non-native, right? So in regards to the other question, there are so not to my knowledge, there aren't any other insects that I've seen that leave that perfect D-shaped exit hole. I don't want to directly say that there are none because there are many insects that we probably don't know what shape the exit hole is, right? But in general, we don't really see D-shaped exit holes from other insects or in other trees, to my knowledge. Maybe there could be there's some information out there that I'm unaware of, but I was always taught that if you see a D-shaped exit hole, it's probably emerald ash borer. If you're seeing it not in an ash tree, I'm not quite sure what that would be, but that's a great question. So I can look into that too. My email address will be at the end of this webinar as well, and you can email me and we can look for some other information. So I'd be happy to do that. Okay, so in terms of symptoms, so these are symptoms that you are going to want to scout for those D-shaped exit holes if you see them, or scout for the galleries. So a lot of these symptoms that I'm going to be discussing are symptoms that have been seen in Colorado infested ash trees. So keep that in mind too. So I just pulled up the chat too. I finally got it up. So flathead borers, yeah, there are a couple of borers that can leave D-shaped shaped holes, but again, I don't really see those in ash trees that often. And whenever I see flathead borers, to me, they seem a little bit less perfectly D-shaped, but that could be just a personal opinion of mine. So thank you, Tony, for adding that in. So one of the main symptoms that we want to see, or that we see if the tree is infested with emerald ash borer, is progressive crown thinning. So if you see the crown that becomes more and more sparse, it's a sign that your tree could have some sort of issue. I have to point out first and foremost, though, that if you see crown thinning, that does not mean that you do have emerald ash borer. There are many other issues that we want to essentially rule out first. That's why I say if you see any of these issues, you want to scout for those D-shaped exit holes. You want to scout for the larval galleries, etc. So in the Colorado infested ash trees, we do see crown thinning. In addition, we also see yellow foliage. So this is pretty characteristic of what the damage looks like, or symptoms look like, in the state of Colorado. We'll see something very similar here, and these same symptoms also are exhibited throughout North America as well. You can also see some reduced leaf size, and crown thinnings on here again. But if you see really reduced leaf sizes, that can be another sign that something is going on with the ash tree. That doesn't necessarily mean that it is emerald ash borer, but it's a sign that there could be emerald ash borer. Another thing that you can see is you can often see completely dead branches, and then dead leaves will still be hanging on the branches. So this doesn't mean that you do have emerald ash borer, but it means that your tree has some sort of issue and emerald ash borer is a possibility. And I just saw a comment from Eric too. Thank you, Eric. And white fringe tree, that's correct. That is the one that I wasn't thinking of the name of. Emerald ash borer has been found attacking white fringe tree. That was the one that that I was thinking of. But as Eric stated, their fecundity in those situations is significantly reduced. So again, they don't really attack them to the extent that they attack ash trees. So thank you, Eric, for adding that in. So if you see those symptoms on the exterior, you see the crown thinning, you see the yellowing leaves or the smaller leaves, that's when you're going to want to check for these galleries. You're going to want to check for those D-shaped exit holes. And then again, a few other beetles are going to make this pattern or this like meandering pattern underneath ash bark. So if you see that, that's a pretty bad sign. If you can combine this with D-shaped exit holes, you probably have emerald ash borer. Some other just things that you can see some bark cracks, underside of limbs near the trunk is where a lot of these cracks can happen. And you can peel back the bark here to look for evidence of the larval galleries. This tends to be a little bit harder for me, but I don't do a lot of active surveying for emerald ash borer. But these are there if you wish to use them. Just peel back the bark sort of in these locations where the limbs meet the trunk. And you can often find some galleries there if it is infested with emerald ash borer. And then again, I just can't reiterate this enough, the D-shaped exit hole is almost always emerald ash borer. So if you're looking at ash, other insects will not usually cause this shape of a hole. And it's kind of weird the first time you ever see it in person, it's completely obvious. I remember the first emerald ash borer emergence hole that I saw, and this is when I didn't really know much about emerald ash borer. I was like, oh, look at that cool like D-shaped exit hole. It's plain as day. So if you see this, you're going to want to contact us or Utah Department of Agriculture and Food to report that if you see it in an ash tree, because that's really important. And it's probably emerald ash borer. And one of the things that I also can't stress enough is that if you do see this crown thinning, if you see the yellowing of the leaves or the smaller leaves, you really need to consider other conditions that could be causing it. And in our lab, whenever we get issues submitted from any tree, whether it be ash or some other tree, it always tends to be some other issue. It rarely tends to be an insect issue that is causing the problems. So another question here. So a lot of the damage looks like ash or lilac borer, except for the D-shaped exit hole. That's correct, yeah. And we're going to talk about some of the other ash pests that we have here in Utah or in the Mountain West region. And you do see a lot of those other things. You see some crown thinning, you see just general stress symptoms, but you don't really see that D-shaped exit hole. You can see some circular exit holes, but you never see that D-shaped one, right? So, and we'll discuss some of these other ash pests too and how they compare to the emerald ash borer pretty shortly here. So again, you really want to consider if the crown could be thinning or if you're seeing these other symptoms due to other things like drought or just water stress, if the tree's not being watered enough, if it's just cold stress, other insect pests, which again, we're going to discuss. So really think about these abiotic conditions, especially because we haven't found emerald ash borer in Utah yet. That doesn't mean that it's not here, but we have not detected it yet. You really want to be thinking about these other problems because odds are that something else is wrong with the tree and not emerald ash borer. So that's going to take us into, you don't want to manage for emerald ash borer unless you actually confirm it, right? So again, if you do see these symptoms and you see D-shaped exit holes and you see these random meandering galleries, please report that to the Utah Plant Pest Diagnostic Lab or to the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food. Include pictures of everything you can. And you cannot just look at the canopy stress symptoms and diagnose that as emerald ash borer. Odds are, again, it's probably something else. And it's always good to keep it quiet too. We haven't detected this pest here yet. We haven't confirmed it. So it's good to keep these reports quiet until the appropriate personnel confirm it and then report it, right? So contact us. You can contact any of the 3 emails up here on the screen right now. I'll give you a couple seconds to write them down. And my email again will be at the end of the presentation, which is the zach.shum@usu.edu. So, okay. So how do we prevent and manage emerald ash borer? Well, the easiest way is to just stop planting ash trees. Again, most of the times we see ash-related issues in Utah, that at least trees that are submitted to our lab to identify the problem, they have, I mean, at least since I've been here, they've never been a native ash species. They've always been something non-native that was planted. because the homeowner or grower, whoever, wanted to plant that ash tree. But because it is possible that emerald ash borer is going to arrive here and that they're so devastating to ash trees, one of the best ways is to just stop planting it. That's the easiest thing you can do. The more ash trees that are here, the worse the problem will be if emerald ash borer ever arrives. So find a really good replacement. There are many resources that you can use to find alternate trees that are maybe susceptible to many types of pests that can't be impacted by this non-native invasive species, right? But let's say that they really want, or you really want, the homeowner really wants ash to be retained, or they want to plant an ash, then it's really important to keep the tree as healthy as possible. So as with many insect pests, the less healthy the tree is, the more susceptible it's going to be to any sort of insect pest. Insects love stressed out trees. I can't stress that enough, no pun intended. So if you do retain ash, just keep it as healthy as possible. Plant a native one that is adjusted to our climate here in Utah. Make sure that it's watered properly. Make sure that the turf isn't coming right up to the base of the tree because the turf is going to steal all the water, right? Just those types of things to keep those trees as healthy as possible. So in regards to insecticides, there are many available. And you'll notice that I probably don't talk about this a ton because we haven't detected it here in Utah, and we don't want to really spray anything without confirming that emerald ash borer is actually here. So there are many, 3 different main or insecticide options. You can do soil applications. This is typically done with imidacloprid or dinotefuran. There are bark applications, again with dinotefuran. And then you can also do trunk injections. Emamectin benzoate or I can't say that whenever you see it on the screen there. I always get tripped up by that. So there are some really great resources to figure out what pesticide or insecticides you can use. And there's one right here on the slide now. This is in our Utah Pest fact sheet. So if you just do a Google search for emerald ash borer, USU, you'll find our Utah Pest fact sheet that has this really great table of how each insecticide is used, the frequency of use, and certainly the active ingredient and the product names. So I encourage you to check this out if you do confirm emerald ash borer wherever you're located. These are the things you're going to want to use. And I will always mention that it's super important that you make sure that you're using a registered product, make sure you're keeping up to date with that, and make sure you're following all the directions to and make sure that it's applied correctly and under regulation. So. And I will have a picture of the fact sheet at the end too, just so you can kind of see what it looks like. And you'll have the opportunity to access this fact sheet. So that will take us to our CEU question number 4, continued discussion. And then we'll also have the opportunity, I think we'll have some extra time at the end if anybody has any last minute questions. So just for some key points of insecticides. Insecticides for emerald ash borer aren't used to prevent emerald ash borer from occurring typically. They're typically a response. So you don't have to apply them to preventatively to save the trees. And you typically want to respond to emerald ash borer with insecticides, which I would personally say is not typically the case. Typically, you don't just want to react. You want to take a really integrated approach. But this is one pest where you rarely apply anything preventatively, okay? Insecticides can, however, save trees as long as that tree hasn't been girdled and the infestation isn't really massive. You can save a tree with insecticides if they're used appropriately. So if we do detect emerald ash borer in the state of Utah, you want to watch all the trees in the nearby area. And it's important to note too that even if you have a healthy tree, if it does become infested, there's still an opportunity for that tree to die. So keeping the tree as healthy as possible will help to prevent an infestation from occurring. But if it is infested, keeping the tree healthy at that point might not be that useful. And typically, it's important to note too that insecticide applications are often required for the entire life of the tree after it has become infested, just to keep it from getting worse, essentially, and allowing the infestation to kill the tree. So just to summarize what we discussed about emerald ash borer, and then we'll go into our other pests that we'll be discussing briefly. It has not been detected in Utah yet, so just keep that in mind. Before you try to manage for it, we really need to confirm that emerald ash borer is here. And abiotic issues, or some other biotic issues as well, as we'll discuss with the other pests, can sort of mimic the symptoms of emerald ash borer. So don't just look at the crown thinning and say, oh, look, this tree has emerald ash borer, because Right now, the odds are that it doesn't. Odds are it's some sort of abiotic issue or another insect pest. Due to our climate here, it's unlikely that emerald ash borer is going to spread rapidly, just due to our climate and sort of the density of our ash trees. And that it's important to just keep in mind that there are effective insecticides to manage it if it does arrive here. However, they're not used to sort of prevent emerald ash borer. They're used to manage it if a tree is infested. And then again, I can't stress this one enough either, that plan ahead. If people are recommending that they want to plant ash, it's probably better not to. There are many great alternatives to ash trees that people can plant that we can help curb the spread of this invasive species if and when it does arrive here. And then also, don't transport firewood. This is really important as well. If you want to essentially, cut down a tree, you don't want to move that firewood from one place to another. That goes for all trees to help other pests, to keep other pests from spreading as well, not just emerald ash borer. So don't spread firewood. It's really important. And I'll notice too, when I was kind of looking at the updated research on how you can properly dispose of a tree that is infested with emerald ash borer or a dead ash tree in general. So there's a lot of data out there now that shows that you can essentially chip the wood up, but you want really small wood chips. You don't want to leave any like 1 or 2 inch wood chips, as the emerald ash borer can still survive in them. So keep that in mind too. If you do take down an ash tree that has been infested with emerald ash borer, you want to chip it into really small pieces. So keep that in mind too. And there's lots of information out there on that that you can look into. So there are some good links. I realize that you all can't click on this where you're at, but there are some links where you can find some good species that you could replace an ash tree with or select instead of an ash tree. So USU uses this really good tree browser, or Tree Utah, and they have these these great web pages on what you can plant instead of ash trees, and that's what we would recommend right now. We get calls all the time, and I've only been in this position for a few months about, hey, we want to plant ash tree. Is that smart? It's not really smart in my personal opinion. Pick something else that is another good ornamental plant that won't help this invasive species spread if and when it arrives here. Okay, so we're going to talk for a little bit about some other common ash pests that we can find here. A lot of these, as we mentioned earlier in the chat, can mimic the symptoms of emerald ash borer aside from the D-shaped exit hole. So we'll discuss these one by one, so I won't go through them on the slide here. So the first one is the red-headed ash borer. So this can attack ash, hackberry, other hardwoods and fruit trees. And they really love, like many pests, stressed or recently dead trees. So these will bore into the heartwood, and they can also be pests of firewood. So this insect is a type of longhorned beetle, so it's in the same order, so large grouping. It is a type of beetle, just like the emerald ash borer. However, it is in a different family, so it behaves a little bit differently. They look a little bit different, but they tend to be the solid brown color, and they have these really interesting yellow stripes on them. I think they're quite beautiful insects as well. And they leave more of a circular exit hole. And for this pest, as you'll find with many of the ones that we discuss, one of the best ways to prevent them is to just maintain the tree health. It's the best way to prevent pests on a tree, is just maintain tree health. So another one that looks very similar to the last one we discussed is the banded ash borer. This will attack ash, elm, hickory, white oak, mesquite. And this again is a type of longhorned beetle, so it's very closely related to the red-headed borer. They tend to be the same size. They tend to be brown. They also have these white stripes. This one is typically a little bit more black in color, so it's more of a brownish black instead of like a dense brown. These will also bore into the heartwood, occasionally in branches, and they are also a pest of firewood. So again, we want to maintain the tree health with this one. They will rarely attack or do damage, at least, to trees that are really healthy. And then we have the ash bark beetle. So this is a really small type of bark beetle. So this is in a different family from the other insects we've talked about. These will just attack ash, and they also just attack really stressed out trees or recently dead trees. There's been some information as well that these will attack newly transplanted trees, but certainly if you have a newly transplanted tree, it's going to be under more stress than one that is well established, right? So the larvae are going to feed on the phloem layer. This can eventually girdle the entire tree and kill the tree. There's 1 to 2 generations per year. And again, we're looking at tree health. Keep that tree really healthy and you can prevent a lot of ash bark beetle damage. You can also prune off branches. If you're seeing that small branches are infested, you can just prune that off. There are some insecticides to manage this one because it is a little bit more impactful to ash tree health. But again, you really want to focus on just preventing it by keeping your tree healthy. And then this is probably the one that we get the most commonly, at least the one that we get submitted to our lab the most commonly. This is the lilac ash borer. So this is a moth pest that I think really mimics a lot of the symptoms of emerald ash borer because you see a lot of the crown thinning, at least in my experience. So this will attack, in my opinion, primarily ash, but they can also attack lilac and privet, or lilac, I guess they attack quite often as well. But so again, this is a clearing moth. It mimics wasps. A lot of people just submit them thinking that they're wasps of some kind. And this is like the primary ash pest, like I was mentioning earlier, in Utah. It's the one that we get submitted the most often. But these, again, don't really kill ash trees often. They typically attack stressed out ash trees. And if they're managed properly, if you have a really healthy tree, you can prevent a lot of this damage. One of the ways that I find that these guys will essentially infest the trees is a lot of like lawnmower or weed whacker damage. That's a really easy way for more insects to essentially attack the tree. So keep that in mind as well. So these guys, since they're the most common one, I'll just give you some more information on them as well. They're going to be present late March to April. You can see these really cool extruding pupal cases coming out of the emergence holes. Not always though, because sometimes they break off, sometimes they fall off. But you'll see these little circular emergence holes and sometimes this really cool pupal case just kind of sticking out of it. So you can manage these by just, again, keeping the tree healthy and through trunk sprays or systemic insecticides. But from what I've seen, tree health is the best way to prevent them. You have a healthy tree, you're going to prevent a lot of these from causing problems. So the next one is carpenter worm moth. So carpenter worm can attack ash, elm, poplar, oak, and other hardwoods as well. This is a large insect. So the insect wingspan is over 3 inches, at least for some of the species. So these overwinter as larvae, and we see the adults around May. There are 2 to 4 generations per year. And again, they're going to leave circular emergence holes as well, and they tend to be a lot larger. So if you're comparing this to emerald ash borer, the emergence hole is just much larger than a lot of the other pests. So if you see a really large emergence hole, you can kind of see a lot of these like this frass, like sort of sawdust-like stuff sticking out. That can be a sign of carpenter worm moth. But again, just really look for those large emergence holes. Again, we're looking at just managing tree health. There are some bark insecticides and nematodes that are available for these. But just keeping the tree healthy is still the best way to prevent these guys from causing a problem. So next we'll discuss ash plant bug. So these feed primarily on ash. These are going to overwinter as eggs and sort of emerge around bud break. And all the damage from these guys is cosmetic. So they're not really going to cause health issues in the tree, but they can cause the leaves to look like they're dying or dead. You see some feeding damage down here on the right where the leaf is just turning brown. So they're not really a tree health issue. It's just cosmetic and aesthetic. So you don't have to really manage for these. They rarely will cause infestations that are going to do any damage to the tree. But you can use insecticides when those buds do break. A lot of these insects, I'll just mention quickly, this is a type of true bug that has a piercing and sucking mouth part. And often true bugs are easier to manage when they're in this nymphal stage, right? So we have these really small green ones right here. Typically that's the case. If it's the nymphal stage, that's when you want to manage. So if you do use an insecticide, use it at bud break when those nymphs are present. You can also use oils, insecticidal soaps, and cover sprays as well. So we have a question here too that I see. If the ash or lilac borer attacks the tree, but doesn't really kill the tree or the other pest, are they more likely to come in at that point and finish the job? Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. So if you have a tree that is infested, or you have a stressed out tree that's attacked by one insect, it's going to make that tree more attractive to other pests as well. And so keep that in mind, that if you have a really stressed out tree, even if that tree is stressed because it has a pest, that can make it susceptible to other pests that can finish the job. I mean, if you have really high infestations of many insect pests, that can kill trees. So keep that in mind. Thank you for bringing that up, actually. stressed out trees will attract multiple pest species. Yeah, that's a great point. So the next one is leaf curl ash aphid. This is another one where the problems tend to be a little bit more cosmetic. They rarely cause problems with the tree health itself. I'll get to your question in one sec, Michelle, about the preventative sprays for lilac ash borer. Leaf curl ash aphid, they typically attack green ash. They're going to overwinter in soils, essentially, and then come out once the temperature is warm and start feeding on the trees. These guys will have many generations per year. And when they feed on the leaves, they're going to cause this pretty characteristic curl in the leaves of the ash trees. You can also see like waxy coatings on the insects themselves, which kind of makes the leaves themselves look waxy. And some cultivars, it's important to note, are a little bit more susceptible. But remember too that green ash isn't one of the native trees here in Utah. So if you only plant the native ash trees, it's less likely that you're going to have issues with leaf curl ash aphid. So typically we recommend systemics for leaf curl ash aphid. So Michelle, to go to your question, preventative sprays for lilac ash borer, I don't want to quote it directly. We have a really good fact sheet on lilac ash borer. That's a pest that I haven't done a lot of work on control recommendations personally. But really you're going to, lilac ash borer, the sprays happen for them in the spring, right? So I wouldn't really call that preventative per se, but you do apply an insecticide in the spring when you're starting to get activity from the lilac ash borer. So feel free to send me an email and we can chat more about that. We do have really good control recommendations for lilac ash borer in our fact sheet. So the next one is oyster shell scale. This will attack many species of trees, including ash. These are going to overwinter in May. And then you're going to have this, what we call a crawler stage from the May to June timeframe. So there's only one generation per year. And this is one where we'll see some like stunting, we'll see some yellow foliage, kind of similar to emerald ash borer. Bark cracking, they can cause tree death in really severe cases, but that tends to not be the case. And this is another type of true bug that has that piercing, sucking mouth part. And just like the other one that we talked about earlier, we want to spray the stage, sort of the nymphal stage, so the crawler stage. These scale insects will create this really protective outer covering over them. If you spray them when they're protected by that, the insecticide is not going to be that effective, right? So you do want to use insecticides when they're in the crawler stage. That's for spray insecticides. And then it's also possible to use systemic insecticides for oyster shell scale as well. And then we have ash flower gall mite. I have not seen any of these reported, but they are a pest of ash trees in Utah and in the Mountain West. And these are going to overwinter as adults, essentially under the little scales of the bark. They'll become active at bud break, and there's many generations of this mite per year. We see some photos here. These are very, very tiny insects. Sometimes they're hard to pick out with the naked eye, and you often need some sort of magnification. They're essentially going to create a gall from the male flower. And then again, these do not really cause health issues with the plant. It tends to be aesthetic. The galls will essentially dry out once the mites are no longer there, and they'll just stay on the tree. You can just remove these galls though. Control of these are difficult. You can use insecticides around bud break. But again, I don't see a ton of these occurring in Utah. Others might see something different, but they tend to not be that big of an issue. Oops. There we go. So again, I can't stress enough though that other ash issues tend to be the primary problem with ash trees. And this goes with like most trees, not just ash. If we have trees submitted and people think that there's some sort of insect problem, it tends to be something like drought stress or heat stress. It's something that could be improved with planting. So if it was planted too deeply or if it was planted in the wrong location. Mechanical damage from lawnmowers, weed whackers, anything that is causing damage to the bark. A lot of these can cause a lot of similar symptoms to emerald ash borer. So you really want to focus on this. And I think one of the most common ones we see is that turf grass that comes right up to the base of the tree or to the trunk of the tree. If you have turf that comes right up to the trunk of the tree, it's going to soak up all of the water that you're putting there. Even if you think you're overwatering or watering enough, odds are the turf is sucking up all that water and the tree has some sort of drought stress. So that is the most common thing we see with ash trees, where they're saying, we're applying 2 to 2.5, even sometimes over 3 inches of water every week in the middle of summer, why is my tree dying? It's because turf grass comes right up to it, and the turf is just sucking up all that water, and the usable water is pretty much non-existent for the tree itself. So keep that in mind. That's really important. So just for some take-home points, just some reminders here. EAB has not, or emerald ash borer has not been detected here in Utah yet. You want to look for those D-shaped exit holes and larval galleries after you're seeing some of those symptoms. If you see some other things like cracks in the bark or woodpecker damage, this could be a sign that something is boring in your tree and you might want to get it checked out or scout for emerald ash borer. We do still recommend reporting suspected emerald ash borer to Utah Department of Agriculture and Food or to the Plant Pest Diagnostic Lab, which again, I'll have my email up here shortly. If you want to report it, that way we can confirm it in the state and take immediate action as needed. So again, the lilac ash borer is the primary pest of ash in the state of Utah, but most pests just end up being aesthetic issues. And again, we want to focus on not planting ash trees, especially if they're not native to Utah. This can all help just curb the potential issues from emerald ash borer if and when it does arrive here. So with that, I will just give you guys my contact information. So this is what our fact sheet looks like here. You can look at our fact sheet at any time, just for some more detailed information on how to scout for them, how to manage them appropriately. And my contact information is here. Our webpage link is here as well. If you have any trees that you suspect may have emerald ash borer, send us some photos. We'll try to scout, we'll help you identify what is causing the problem and we can go from there.